Hello, it's Kim Walker from Handmade Apothecary again. Today we're going to talk about another herb, elder or elderberry, because we've talked about elder in the spring and it's now time to talk about the berries. So I'm going to tell you all about the identification and what it's used for herbally, and then in a minute Rebecca Lazarou of Laz the Plant Scientist is going to tell you how it works in the body. So here's a lovely elder tree. You find them really commonly along the side of paths, in hedgerows, towpaths, canals and river paths, and they're pretty good by waterways because the berries tend to be really nice and juicy. As we said, in springtime, this is the leaf. It's got some leaflets that are slightly toothed. 5 leaflets. If you were to crush this and smell it, which I'm about to do now, it has a very pungent smell. So in spring we said this is a resin that we like to make infused oil out of for bruises. It is really strong in spring, but once it's gone to flower and berry it's not very strong at all, but it still has a bit of an acrid smell. So do get your nose in for that kind of smell so you can understand how to identify it. So if you had a look at what the flowers looked like back in spring, I said they hang in the trees a bit like flying saucers or somebody's rested plates in, kind of facing upwards. After they go to berry, they get really heavy and start hanging down, and you can see that these have all started to turn downwards now. They sometimes have red stems, sometimes they have green stems. Don't worry if they have one or the other, it's just differences in the bush. These ones are unripe because they're red and a bit green, so they start off being very green and they start going towards being red. When they're ready, they look like this. Really deep purple, very glossy, very plump berries. And I would pick heads like this. Sometimes you might have 1 or 2 red or green ones are, like by my pinky here. But it's okay because I'm going to show you how to take them off the stem to use for making elderberry syrups. So I've picked some berries here. Now, herbalists will use these in cordials and syrups to make kind of a cough syrup. And they'll also use it in tinctures, which is an alcoholic extract. We have recipes for that on our website if you want to check that out. But you can also use it as a food, so some people eat these in things like jams or syrups. One of the main questions we're often asked is, can you eat these raw? Because some people say you can and some people say you can't. And what it is there are compounds in here that are emetic. In the past it used to be used as an emetic, which means something that will make you throw up. So it does have these compounds in there, but some people are more sensitive to it than others, so some people can get away with a few and others cannot at all. We have had cases where we know people who've tried to smoothie them, drinking them raw, and it makes them throw up. But once they're cooked or processed, it's absolutely fine, you can use them. And how do herbalists use them? So the main thing we use them for medicinally is as an immune herb. So we like to use it as a preventative or a treatment for colds and flus, because colds and flus are viruses, and some research has shown that flavonoids in these berries prevent the virus from replicating in the body. But Rebecca Lazarou, who's coming on next, is going to tell you a bit more about that.
Hi, so elderberry, it was a super interesting plant. One of the main active compounds in it are called anthocyanidins, which have been shown to be immunostimulants, so they increase the levels of white blood cells in your immune system. Also, it's loaded with vitamin C and iron, and vitamin C is really important because you need that in order to make your white blood cells and in order to make antibodies as well, which are the little flags which white blood cells pin on pathogens and bacteria and viruses to basically warn the rest of the immune system that action needs to happen there. Also, flavonoids have been shown to be really important for the antiviral effects of elderberry. Now, elderberry has a really interesting mechanism of action, one of my favourites in fact, and basically the way that it works is viruses can't replicate their own DNA. So what they do is they will hijack a human healthy cell, they will bind to it and inject their DNA into it and hijack the machinery in order to replicate DNA and proliferate, and then when there's hundreds of thousands of them, they burst and release from the cell, and that's how viruses get stronger and stronger. And it does these using these little spikes on its little feet, if you will, called hemagglutinin spikes. Now, elderberry actually neutralizes these spikes, so they can't bind to our cells and infect us, which I think is fascinating. Another thing that elderberry does is it increases our levels of certain interleukins and cytokines and tumour necrosis factor. Now what these are, your immune system isn't just made up of white blood cells, it's made up of communicating molecules as well, and it's the language that the immune system uses is to communicate and be able to say, yeah, we need more of these white blood cells here, we need more of these types here. They use things called cytokines and interleukins and tumour necrosis factor and some other things, and elderberry has been shown to increase levels of these, therefore amplifying the volume of the message and making your immune response stronger. Now, in fact, elderberry has been shown to be so useful that some governments were using it in the 1995 Panama flu epidemic in order to help combat the disease. And clinical trials have shown that compared to placebo, elderberry decreases flu-like symptoms and cold-like symptoms, and on average it decreases the duration of a flu by 4 days. So super helpful stuff.